Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds force, is dead. President Trump decided to take out this terror mastermind in Baghdad. Does this mean war? Not yet, and I don't think it will. We'll talk about it coming up. We have pretty earth-shattering news, a big decision, and one of the biggest in terms of foreign policy of the Trump administration, certainly right up there with the trade dispute with China, with the extension of President Trump's hand to Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps' Quds force, their external operations arm, has been killed. He was killed near Baghdad International Airport by a drone strike, one that was clearly ordered from the very top. The White House gave the go-ahead for this. President Trump himself had to approve this, had to decide to take out Qasem Soleimani. This has resulted in hysterics from the left. The anti-Trump Twitter stuff that you would see right now if you were to log on, or what you would hear in much of the news media, is not surprising, but it's stunning nonetheless. People are saying that we are at war. They are claiming that this was an enormous and reckless blunder by Trump, and these are the same people that think that everything Trump does is an enormous and reckless blunder. I'm here to tell you that they are wrong. They are very wrong. Qasem Soleimani was responsible, first and foremost, for our purposes, what matters most to us as Americans. One, he was responsible for plotting now, according to numerous reports and from the very top of the administration, including Secretary of State Pompeo, attacks, imminent attacks on U.S. interests. We don't know more than that, but he wasn't in the Baghdad area because he was on his way to a nice vacation on the north coast of Africa or something. He decided that it was going to be retaliation for what Trump did to shut down the embassy protests, which weren't really protests. It was an effort to try and overrun a U.S. facility, and it could have gotten completely out of hand if we had not responded with firmness, if Trump had not sent additional Marines to secure the embassy and put a tremendous amount of pressure on the Iraqi government to actually be allies and do something about this. The point we'll have to return to here. But Qasem Soleimani was planning operations against U.S. interests. And we could have, if you want to take this position, we could have taken the position that waiting was the better thing to do. He could have waited until Soleimani sent a dump truck packed with explosives, perhaps, into an embassy, or ordered a Shia militia entirely funded, trained, and backed by the mullahs in Tehran to capture, torture, and kill U.S. personnel in Iraq. And then we could have responded more forcefully, because I'm sure those were the kind of operations under consideration for Soleimani. If Iran escalates, my friends, so will our response. There's a very important lesson here from all of this, and it's also taken from the history of what Soleimani did in the region, specifically in Iraq as well. This guy has been listed as a terrorist since 2005. He has been involved in spreading the theocratic insanity and oppression and tyranny of the mullahs of Tehran, the Islamic revolution of the Shia theocracy in Iran, to countries throughout the region, has been backing terrorist groups that have struck as far as a Jewish center in Buenos Aires. They will go after people anywhere all over the world using their Hezbollah proxies, using other terrorist entities. And we keep hearing from the left that we should wait for them to change their ways, work with them, bring them more in the international community. And we'll get into the Obama administration failed response in a moment. But here's what I just want you to take away from this first and foremost. I think the lesson here is that if you are a leader who orders the murder of U.S. soldiers as part of a clandestine proxy war outside your own borders, we will find you and we will kill you. It's a very important and worthwhile lesson, and it is one that Qasem Soleimani has now learned, perhaps you could say the hard way. That should be restored in the perception of our enemies and our allies all over the world. Everyone should know what the response will be to killing Americans. Qasem Soleimani, as I discussed with you yesterday before this happened, remember we were talking about EFPs and the murder of U.S. soldiers. We've been discussing that here on this show. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps came up with the strategy and even manufactured the devices and showed Shia militia members in Iraq how to use them. And they weren't trying to just gain a hand over the ruling regime. It was specifically kill American soldiers, bleed them, wound them, cut off their arms, cut off their legs, kill them. That was the plan from the IRGC. We were not at war with Iran. We had not invaded Iran, killing our people. While we were engaged in, at that point, stabilization operations, trying to keep the lights on, get the sewage running, build some schools in Iraq. Whether you think that's a good thing for us to do or not, I will leave to talk about it on another day. They were trying to maim, trying to wound, trying to kill our soldiers, and Soleimani ordered operations personally, directly, that killed an estimated 500 to 600 U.S. soldiers. Realistically, it was probably double that. It's a lot of bodies. That's a lot of folded flags coming home to American families. Gold Star families told, sorry, dad or mom's never coming home because of this evil you-know-what. And now he's gone. I've got to tell you, this is a good day for America, and I know that the response could be ferocious from Iran, at least in the short term. People are overstating this, and I will get into that at some extent. I just wanted to declare, because we're going to talk about this a lot today on the show. This is now overshadowing everything else. The question is, are we going to war with Iran? After Afghanistan and Iraq and our quasi-war in Syria, are we going to go into an all-out conflict with Iran? I think that gets far ahead of where we are right now. And I don't agree with people like Bolton, who are already saying, I hope this is a step toward regime change. Because if we start getting involved in regime change in Iran, then we get involved in what comes after this regime. It's our responsibility. Nation building, peacekeeping operations, holding back the sectarian hatreds that stretch back centuries, over a millennium in some cases in this region. I mean, they're hating each other for quite some time. It's not going to stop anytime soon. We don't want that. We don't want to be in charge of Iran. We don't want to be the ones that topple the Iranian government. If the Iranian people take it upon themselves to finally get it together and oust these tyrants, good for them. But in the meantime, we should not be afraid of our own shadow here on the world stage. And we'll discuss the way that this is such a clear repudiation of what had become normalized under the Obama administration. President Obama had normalized bowing and apologizing, going all over the world and expressing this point of view that America is often the bad guy, has a lot to be sorry for. Meanwhile, if we're really doing, if we're doing, points on a board here, the rest of the world should be thankful for America every night they go to sleep, every day they wake up. Not saying we're perfect, but if you're going to start saying, what do we do that's good and what do we do that's bad? How have we helped the world and how have we harmed the world? It's not even close. We're not perfect, but we're a lot closer than any other country that has complete military superiority over any adversary on the planet. We're still there. The Chinese are catching up to us, but we are still there. Absolute military superiority. And I think we have to have a reminder of that here. Because it is true, and you're going to see a lot of people going on television in particular. TV tends to draw the worst national security analysts. TV tends to be the place where you see, especially if you turn on CNN or MSNBC, you will see individuals who have no sense of history, horrific strategic judgment, have been wrong time and time again in the past, because there is a degree of prediction here. And I'm going to tell you right now, nobody knows what's coming next, but I do know that we have to be vigilant and prepared. But if you want to be prepared properly, you have to understand the nature of the threat and the likelihood of where you're going to get hit and how. So you're going to see endless speculation on TV most of it from people who know very little of Iraq, of the Iraq War, of the Middle East, of national security. Nobody really knows what is coming next, and we have to just be wise and vigilant in the meantime. Beyond that, we're in a waiting game. The national security apparatus in this country already has things in motion that people like me and you who aren't in the know. I used to be in the know. I used to work for the CIA's Office of Iraq Analysis. Deployed to Iraq twice. Now we just assume or have to take our best guess at what may be happening behind the scenes of the most fearsome military apparatus the world has ever seen, which is the United States military. And this is where I have to break with those who say that we are about to be drawn into war by Iran. How is Iran going to draw us into a war exactly, and why would they do that? If they use proxies or cutouts to hit us, there's a very important difference here from the war on terror, as we called it for a while, and then the Obama administration, of course, I think wanted to call it the overseas contingency operations against violent extremism, and I'm maybe only missing a word or two there. That was more or less what the Obama administration, because I was there when Obama took over. I was in the CIA, actually working in Afghanistan at the time. And while we look at the counterterrorism fight of the past, one of the biggest frustrations we had is, okay, you get hit by Al-Qaeda. Let's say you get hit by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. If they were to take out a plane, a mass casualty attack, we can respond by trying to take out some of their fighters somewhere. Maybe we blow up a training facility, but how do we really hit them where it hurts? It's not easy. You're fighting an enemy that obeys no rules, no laws of war, has neither decency nor fixed address. Iran has a fixed address. Iran cannot hide. The Iranian regime is in no position, and it knows it, to go toe-to-toe with the United States government. So when people say things like, well, what would happen? I'm seeing so much of this. If the Iranians assassinated a four-star general on U.S. soil, well, first of all, you're making all kinds of leaps that are not similar to the situation here. So let's just say that if we're going to make these comparisons, we should be exact in what we're talking about. Qasem Soleimani was acting as an enemy combatant in a country that was not his own, plotting to attack U.S. interests in an area where we have military force and we are fighting a war still. We are still in the midst of operations in the Iraq and Syria theater to try and defeat the Islamic State, to try to hold back Shia militias. So it is a theater of conflict. And this guy was operating with impunity for years. Why? Because we're so afraid of what Iran will do in response? Oh, Iran will shut down the Straits of Hormuz? Let me tell you something. The difference when you're dealing with a nation-state actor, especially one that does not yet have nuclear weapons, thank God. And no thanks to the Obama administration, by the way. We will get there. The difference here is that we can decide very specifically what the price will be and how we will exact that price from the Iranians. People say, what if they shut down the Strait of Hormuz with missile strikes? What if they hit oil tankers? Okay, well, then they'll have the entire international community legitimately upset at them, because that will shut down 20 to 25% of the world's oil reserves for at least a period of time. Good news is, because of fracking, which Democrats hate, by the way, America is the world's global energy superpower now. No thanks to leftists and socialists in this country trying to prevent us from getting to where we are today, saying that we're all going to have dirty drinking water and, we're all going to die. Because I always say this, we're all going to die unless you do what the crazy, ignorant leftists say. But if the Iranians were to, and this is the most obvious place, the most obvious strategic target, go after tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, and this has been a concern, by the way, for decades. Well, we already had the tanker war with them. You can look this one up back in the 80s. This has happened before. We've already shown the Iranians, look, you guys better back off. And the Iranians know that the price that they will pay will be extreme. Whatever they do to us, we are in a position to do back to them tenfold. They are not in the position to do the same to us. They're not able to. So at first I said, let's look at how this situation played out with Qasem Soleimani in Iraq and not start coming up with these crazy comparisons. Oh, well, what if they assassinated, somebody in the Pentagon tomorrow? Is that okay? Obviously, that's different in a whole variety of ways. But apart from that, they're Iran and we're America. There's an asymmetry between our power, and that dictates much of what is going to happen and should happen in this relationship. At the end of the day, they can't do the things that we can do, which is why they don't do them. Keep in mind that if they could, they would eradicate us and they would eradicate Israel. They're not in a position to do so. Whether we respond in crushing fashion to whatever they do next is up to the leadership of this country. Provocation after provocation. We told them, stop. They sabotaged tankers. They brought down a drone. They killed U.S. soldiers in Iraq. They spread their terror throughout the Middle East. They've been assisting and backing Hezbollah and even Hamas in order to attack Israel. Hamas being Sunni, but the Shia terrorists of Iran, the relationship has cooled a bit, but they'll work with Sunni Hamas as long as they're going after the little Satan, as they call it, of Israel. And we are, of course, the great Satan. We are not at war. I don't think we're going to war. We should avoid war. But we're also not suffering in silence anymore. Qasem Soleimani is dead, and that is a good thing.
I can't talk too much about the nature of the threats, but the American people should know that President Trump's decision to remove Qasem Soleimani from the battlefield saved American lives. There's no doubt about that. He was actively plotting in the region to take actions, a big action as he described it, that would have put dozens, if not hundreds of American lives at risk. We know it was imminent. This was an intelligence-based assessment that drove our decision-making process. The American people also know the history of Qasem Soleimani. Hundreds of American lives on his hands, too. He was involved in the Beirut bombings. He'd orchestrated an attack right here in Washington, D.C. It ultimately failed. This is a man who's put American lives at risk for an awfully long time. And last night was the time that we needed to strike to make sure that this imminent attack that he was working actively was disrupted.
Or Trump could have waited. I think Trump made the right move.
We've anticipated a wide range of possible responses, and we have done our level best under the direct guidance of the president to prepare for all of those possibilities. We hope the actual response, John, is that the Iraqi people will do what they've been doing for months. They'll demand that the Iraqi government give them freedom, prosperity, and sovereignty. We've watched these protests over the last weeks. They weren't burning American flags. They were demanding that Iraqi political leadership stop their kleptocracy, stop their political shenanigans. And Qasem Soleimani was at the center of that. He was driving bad outcomes for the Iraqi people. He was causing many Muslims in the region to be killed. I saw last night there was dancing in the streets in parts of Iraq. We have every expectation that people, not only in Iraq, but in Iran, will view the American action last night as giving them freedom.
Qasem Soleimani was the action arm of the worst elements of the Iranian regime. He was the guy who was tasked with, and unfortunately was quite adept at it, because he's ruthless, because he was a true believer, and he was more efficient, better financed, better trained, and had more freedom of action in the region than any of his competitors. Now Qasem Soleimani is dead, as well as another senior Shia militia member. So I would say too bad, but as you know, this is actually a big win for the good guys. Everyone should understand that. I want to get to what's coming next as far as I see it. And as I've told you, the proviso, I know that no one knows exactly what is going to happen here, including, I think, the Iranians. They're figuring out right now because they didn't believe that this would be done. The Iranians had gotten used to, as I said, the normalization under the Obama administration, yes, to a lesser extent under the Bush administration. I remember working Iraq under the Bush administration, and some of these Shia militants, I'll see their names pop up today. Some of you who serve know exactly what I'm talking about. You remember Muqtada al-Sadr. You remember these other, these Shia militia leaders that were involved in specifically targeting U.S. soldiers because they viewed that as a way of getting more leverage for Iran inside of Iraq and pushing back on U.S. interests there. So they were killing our people. And there were conversations about what we should do, and the Bush administration had just been largely exhausted by that point. Once you came around to 2000 and late 2007, 2008, exhausted by just preventing Iraq from turning into a full-blown cauldron of sectarian civil war. It took some steps into that. I mean, at some points, it was effectively a civil war along sectarian lines. And there was horrific violence going on, systemic violence in the streets of Baghdad, in the streets of Kirkuk, of Mosul, of Bakuba, cities all across the Iraqi theater. But the Bush administration did not have, quite honestly, the guts to go after someone like a Qasem Soleimani, even though they knew that this guy was responsible for directing attacks or killing Americans. At what point does someone lose this facade of, oh, we can't touch him? The foreign policy intelligentsia up until now would have told you that Qasem Soleimani, to borrow from the movie The Departed, is a guy you can't touch. He was like a made guy in the Middle East. You couldn't touch him. Why? Because we're so worried about the Iranian response? Because the Iranians will do bad things to us? The Iranians were already training all the worst terror groups in the region, assisting terror groups, providing safe haven for terrorists inside of Iran, murdering people, torturing people, killing people, spreading explosives, spreading weapons, everything. How much worse, and trying to get nuclear weapons, how much worse is it really going to get? Oh, because the Iranians only fund and direct Hezbollah, for example, because the Iranians only fund and direct the Houthi militants or Shia militias in Iraq, they are not to be held responsible for this. And this was one of the fundamental flaws, and this is why you're seeing so many people on the left making complete jackasses of themselves, calling this an assassination. It's not an assassination. This guy's a military combatant in a theater of war trying to kill our troops. If we can't kill him, you got to ask the question, why not? And the foreign policy so-called intelligentsia has been telling us for years and would have said before today, oh my gosh, you can't kill Qasem Soleimani. Okay, so he has the invincibility card. He can do anything he wants, up to and including ordering the killing of hundreds of U.S. soldiers. And we won't do anything in response? Why not? What special invulnerability should be conferred on this guy? And it was for years. You had two presidents from both parties who just didn't have the stomach for doing what was necessary. And finally, Trump came along. Trump, who's supposed to know nothing about foreign policy, be such a wild ignoramus on issues of global affairs. Trump comes along and says, enough. This is wrong. This should not continue on as it is. And you had two presidents in a row, as I said, were scared to do what was necessary. Trump wasn't willing to be the third such president. He did what was necessary. What was the alternative? Wait for Qasem Soleimani to conduct some kind of attack? We've already been in a period of escalation for a while. All the Iranians have to do is essentially stop being a crazy, belligerent nation. That's all the Iranian regime. And I do like to separate out. I feel badly for the day-to-day Iranian people who are stuck, who are prisoners of these lunatics. I mean, many of them obviously are complicit in the regime, but there are a lot of them who aren't. And they're prisoners of these maniacs. But we can't allow the maniacs to get away with whatever they want to do against us and against allies in the region. We know that they have pressure points where they can hit us. And I mean, we could debate all day and never get anywhere on whether Iraq was a good decision or not. I think in retrospect, it's very hard to justify the invasion of Iraq, but we did it. We're there. And that doesn't give the Iranians carte blanche to do whatever the heck they want to us and to our soldiers and to our personnel in that country. I mean, here's a tip for the media. Trying to storm our embassy is an act of war. So if we're going to get lectured about acts of war and assassinations from people who know very little about the realities of either, at least understand what has really happened here. They also have Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, also known as Jamal al-Ibrahimi, who's a senior Shia militia leader who was killed in this strike, reportedly by a Reaper drone outside of Baghdad airport. By the way, excellent work by military and intelligence teams here that must have been involved in this. But I think that the president has shown a willingness to do exactly what many of us were hoping all along, which is to make the tough call, to make the tough decision. This is what Obama would not do. By the way, Trump enforced the red line with Syria about chemical weapon usage and actually struck at the Syrian regime. By the way, did that lead to war? Are we at war with Syria? No, we are not. In large part because we are powerful up here, and Syria their power is down around here, and guess what? If they get out of line, we can crush them. I'm not saying we should. I'm not trying to sound like a warmonger. I hate the idea of a war in Iran. We should not occupy Mideast countries. We should not try to destabilize, to do regime change and then do stabilization operations and all this stuff. We've done that. That's over with. That period in our history, I hope we never go back to. But we don't have to try very hard if we want to hit them so badly that we can put them back in the Stone Age. It's not that difficult for the United States military. And they know that too. If they had the capability to crush us, they would. We don't crush them because we're a moral and decent nation and don't want to do these kinds of things. But the political opposition to this is just, it's stunning. Everyone agrees that this is the formulation you get. I mean, there are the crazy leftists who are saying that this is like, I saw one leftist who said this was like killing, I think it was George Washington, like Abraham Lincoln, and someone else all at once by killing Qasem Soleimani. We've destroyed the most revered and beloved figure in all of Iran, and we're going to bring the Iranian hellfire down on, well, actually, we brought the hellfire down on Qasem Soleimani probably, but we're going to bring the reality of Iran's wrath upon us and all this stuff. I mean, yeah, the Iranians, they're going to respond. They're going to have to find a way to do it that it doesn't quite trigger an angry Trump. This is also where I think having a guy who is unpredictable is favorable to us. Because the Iranians, this is a vicious, blood-soaked, evil regime. I mean, the Iranian regime is really terrible. They routinely order murders and executions and imprisonment of dissidents and terrorist attacks against innocent civilians. I have no problem with this whatsoever. They thrive on it. People at the very top, the Guardian Council, the leadership of Iran, the mullahs. I mean, it's a mullahocracy, and this is a country that should not exist the way that it does. But here we are. Here we are. And the Democrats never disappoint with how absurd they're willing to be on this stuff. I mean, you had Joe Biden release a statement. President Trump just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox. I think he stuck the dynamite into Qasem Soleimani. And he owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and plan to keep safe our troops and embassy personnel, our people, and our interests. It's just essentially Biden saying, I don't like it because Trump did it. That's it. That's all he really has to say. The good news for us is that Biden has been reliably wrong on every major foreign policy decision of the last 40 years. So his opposition to the Soleimani strike should be taken as a huge data point in favor of it. What you're also seeing right now is it's even more apparent this morning than it was last night. But you have many prominent Democrats and former White House officials from the Obama administration who aren't even really that upset about escalation here or war, the prospect of war. What they're upset about is that Trump's decisive action is a repudiation of Obama's approach to Iran, which was maniacal appeasement at any cost, including letting Qasem Soleimani continue to run around and do all this support of terrorism and undermine our interests and our allies' interests in a part of the world that, we'd like to forget about, but unfortunately because of the energy situation there, we got to kind of deal with it. This is where we are. You will see more Democrats coming out in opposition to this in the days ahead and saying crazy things because to them, and I mean this, I do not believe this is overstatement, Donald Trump is a bigger threat than Qasem Soleimani. Now, I don't mean a bigger political threat, because you could actually make that case to Democrats who are lustful for power and insane about how much they hate Trump. But I think they actually believe that Trump is a bigger threat to global security than Qasem Soleimani. They really think that. That's how absurd they are. And if you think that perhaps, and you generally know that I am not one for prone to overstatement, although in radio that's certainly a tool that a lot of people like to use, get a little bit of attention. The world's going to end tomorrow. Ilhan Omar shared this one. I mean, Ilhan Omar just perfectly captures here, just nails the left-wing view on this, which is, this is what she wrote on Twitter. So what if Trump wants war, knows this leads to war, and needs the distraction? Real question is, will those with congressional authority step in and stop him? I know I will. Okay, first of all, she's not going to step in and stop anything. Second of all, what is Trump trying to distract from exactly? Record low unemployment, record high stock market, booming prosperity, a border that's increasingly secure. What exactly is Trump trying to distract from here? An impeachment process that, unless you're just a wild-eyed partisan, is a sham, a total sham. It's a joke. It's preposterous. And it's falling flat even from the perspective of the power-mad Democrats. So what is Trump trying to distract from? I mean, she's saying this is wag the dog with a strike on Qasem Soleimani? No. This is the reestablishing of a very important and very basic principle, which is that we just will no longer accept this. We will no longer be in a position where we will need, or where we will accept continued plotting by a former military intelligence officer who has directed hundreds of assassinations of American soldiers with total impunity in a theater of declared hostilities. Trump was not willing to accept this anymore. At what point is enough enough? And all the Iranians have to do is stop being belligerent lunatics. That's all they have to do. And things would get a lot better very quickly. But if they're not going to stop, we're not going to stop. The Obama administration policy was let them just keep on the shelf their nuclear program, get a whole bunch of cash, in fact, deliver cash to them, literally deliver it, pallets of cash, as we remember. I told you I was at CNN. Oh, they're not paying off a terrorist regime. That money already belonged to Iran or something. And it's just absurd. That didn't change Iranian behavior. All it did is embolden it. Qasem Soleimani was running around taking selfies on battlefields. He was laughing at us. He was mocking us. This is a guy that was killing our soldiers. He should have been terrified to show his face anywhere. He's just driving around in Baghdad like it's no big deal. I don't think so. But the Obama legacy here of the Iran deal is also in play. And that's why you're seeing the Ben Rhodes, MSNBC, CNN echo chamber of just in a fury over this. You know, I guess condolences, guys. Your favorite Iranian terrorist just got taken out.
This morning, Iran's master terrorist is dead. The architect and chief engineer for the world's most active state sponsor of terrorism has been removed from the battlefield at the hand of the United States military. No man alive was more directly responsible for the deaths of more American service members than Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Quds force within Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Cocaine Mitch gets it. Everyone who looks at this, take Trump out of it for a second. Everyone who looks at this seriously understands this could not continue. We couldn't have this guy running around killing our people, plotting against us, and he's untouchable? We can't do anything because, oh no, Iran? Well, then Iran's already won. We've surrendered the battlefield before we've even taken it. I don't think so. God bless Trump for making the right call here.